Hello everyone. In today's episode we're going to be looking at gluing complicated miniatures and having them ready for painting. So first, a paintbrush. Looking at a miniature like the drone, it has details that are a little hard to reach, but everything is pretty much accessible with the paintbrush. So we have a look around, poke in it wherever we want to have a paint, just to get a feel for it. This way we can see if we'll be able to paint in somewhere and if the assembled pieces are going to get in the way of it. I think for this miniature it should be fine to go without multiple part assembly. And by that I mean we can paint that miniature as one piece. Having a look at the gun drone, similar situation, getting in between, fingers in the way, okay, getting in between the, here, getting in between the guns. It'll be a bit shaded, but we'll be able to still see and control the brush properly. And for the shield drone, it's actually less complicated than the others, and so it'll be fine. However, when we look at more complicated assemblies like this with the battle suit, this has some intricate parts to it. So if the arms are attached, getting in, you can still see it mostly, but it's getting close to wanting to break it apart. However, where the pelvis meets the torso, you can't see in there. So there's two ways of looking at it. One is if you can't see it for while you're painting it, you're not going to see that much of it after it's painted, so it doesn't matter that much. The other approach is you'll be able to tell to some extent even after it's put together, so you may as well break it apart during the gluing so that you can reach in there, get some detail done, and then glue it together. Having these leg armor pieces, they're also adding complexity. Between the joints, it's hard to get into places, but they are still a little bit visible. But I think for the most part, it should be okay if we do it all as one. Next, looking at having these elevated. So since they've got a jetpack, if we use the transparency pieces to hold them up, that way it can be in a flying pose, not relying on the leg strength to hold it up. With this piece coming in, that will block access to parts that are visible, such as the back of the pelvis. And the detail in there will be visible. So I think a good way to disassemble this piece, got a shoulder pad coming off a bit. If I assemble the top and the bottom separately, then I can glue them later and paint them separately. That way I'll have much better access all around. And so let's get on with that. So for this there's going to be, next stage is the gluing, which means removing of all the blue tack, because that's just to get an idea of the posing of it. Got a fair idea of the posing of it, so we can do that as we glue. I'll be gluing the top section together, followed by the bottom sections. And for the drones, I'll do them all as one. So let's fly through that. Okay, now that the legs have been disassembled and all of the blue tack taken off, we can proceed with gluing these together. Okay, so after a bit of fumbling and a bit of excess glue at the start, that is the legs for the first battle suit finished. So it's all glued together and just waiting to dry now. So let's move on to the torso. Just slowing it down again. So this is the actual pace of it. It's just dab, dab, dab with the sticky putty, and it's bit by bit pulling it off. So one thing I'm experimenting with at the moment, as you'll see throughout this video, is the change of pace. I was using this in earlier episodes of having some fast-paced recording and some regular paced recording, just to break up the speed of things a bit, remove some of the monotony of just watching me go over and over and over doing the same thing. But this time it's actually for a different purpose. Sure, it's to remove some of the boredom from watching me do this bit by bit by bit to get something to unstick. This time it's actually to avoid one of the issues that I hit with the previous episode of recording for more than 40 minutes straight, and that resulted in the last part of the recording not being saved. So this time, just breaking it down into lots and lots of different clips so that it can all be spliced together just as well as if it was all one single recording. But this way, not going to lose anything to data crunch. Okay. And with that, that is the torso disassembled. So now, let's jump into gluing it together a little bit more. This piece was a bit tricky because there's actually a very slight gap. So in these half cylinder sections, there's actually a gap at the very end, which means the tiniest bit of the putty got through and it's just not coming out very easily. But it shouldn't be enough to interfere with gluing it. Okay, on with the gluing. Okay, so now we have the legs assembled and the torso. And separate, I kept the shoulder pad for the left shoulder. So this shoulder pad is actually going to interfere with painting the elbow joint and the insides of the jetpack. And because of that, we can have that as a separate piece for when we're painting it. So that will apply for all three of them. I'm going to have the right shoulder pad separate. Okay, let's just fly through with all the rest of them. Here we go. Now these antenna pieces are proving a bit difficult for getting the blue tack out of. So since it's not unsticking, I'm going to try with one of the sculpting tools. See if I can use that to dig it out. And yep, it's working. So the reason why these are so difficult is because there's not enough room, not enough surface area for the for this clump of blue tack to stick to the little dregs that are in here, and they're tightly pressed against the walls inside it because there just wasn't enough space otherwise when it was pressed in to hold when it was blue tacked against the head. So that was the difficulty in getting them to stick when I was blue tacking them all together, and now it's the difficulty in getting them to unstick so that I can glue it together. So one round of blue tacking it all together to get a feel for how they fit and how they pose, but if I get another set of these, not gonna do the blue tacking, just gonna go straight to glue them, and that should save any of the issues. Disassembly complete. Now on to the assembly with the glue. Just like last time, going to do the torso as one piece, the legs as one piece, and leaving the shoulder pads separate. Now, one thing that I've found with positioning the jetpacks is that if you angle them forwards, they block the movement of the arms. So it's good to angle them back a bit. And also that way the thrusters are facing more downwards into the back instead of up. So it's more of a downward momentum of the thrust pushing it up. So yeah, I guess it's different to the Space Marine jetpacks where it's just a single rocket facing backwards, and so to have that angled down and back would have the same effect as these facing in this direction. So let's keep going. Okay, that worked much better, doing it segment by segment, gluing the jetpack left and right together, gluing the head and antenna together, as well as doing it leg by leg before assembling the whole lower body. So next is onto the commander, a slightly more complicated version of the same thing. It's missing one of its antenna. I'll have to find that. So let's get on with pulling this apart and gluing it back together. Same deal with the right shoulder. In this position, the right shoulder is not interfering with the jetpack, but just in case, I'll keep it separate. Actually, scrap that. It's because of the painting issue that I'll be keeping it separate, and I'll be positioning the jetpacks further forward just to remove any added difficulties. So, after some reviewing of old footage, there was no second antenna. So, prepare this one. It's big, it's chunky, and it'll go on the side of the head there. So, now that that's been sorted out, let's get on with pulling it apart and putting it back together. Okay, so it's all pulled apart now, and on to putting it together. One quick note, I found with the hands, so as you can see it's got 3 fingers. I spoke previously about the intention of doing some sculpting conversions of the models to make them more human-like. I don't believe that it's needed for these ones. A 3-fingered hand or even a 4-fingered hand is acceptable for a battlesuit because it's not the person itself. And so a little finger or a pinky finger isn't really needed on a battlesuit. So even as humans, we may end up building battlesuits that don't have 5 fingers. So let's put it together. Okay, so for this larger antenna, it's actually bigger than the other large antenna, and the attachment is the wrong size. So this piece does not match. That needs to go with one of the smaller antenna, and that will make it balance out, especially since the position is further back on the head. So a smaller antenna would reach a similar distance back as the end of the other large antenna. So I'm gonna find a different piece. Okay, so after going through all of the options, I liked this one the best. So as you can see here, it's much smaller. This is actually from the Fire Warriors, so it's not from the battle suits, but the battle suits all seem to only have, well, for the battle suits and the Fire Warriors, it all appeared to be for the other side of the head. So that giant antenna was the best match for size as far as the attachment point. Actually, no, scrap that. It was the nearest to a battlesuit sized antenna that goes on that side of the head. But for the attachment point, the Fire Warrior antenna fits best. So let's jump back into some fast glue. Okay, so that's all three of them assembled. Next step is to set up the bases with the flying transparency pieces. These are the bases. These are the large bases, and there's no preset hole for these transparent pieces to slot into. And so next step is to punch a hole, drill it out, and glue one of these in, either in the center or a bit off center. And once those are in, the torsos can be suspended from them. But I don't want to glue the torsos to these transparent spikes at the moment, because that'll get in the way of painting the back. So that'll do for today's session, partly because I'm about to run out of battery. So hope you all enjoyed this, and we'll continue on with more assembly. We'll probably do the drones next. That'll just be a straight run through, and yeah, then we can get on with some painting. There's a lot more work needed to be done on the Fire Warriors, so we can look at that another time. Okay, have a great time. Bye now.